Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community.
Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast. We're having with us today, we're honored, Arian Keddell. She has been a Broadway performer for many years, and she's been on Chicago for what?
5 years.
5 years now? Arian, would you be able to just share us a little bit about your journey from the dance studio to the stages of Broadway?
Sure. So I began my training as a ballerina, as a young ballerina. And then when I was about 14 years old, I saw a tour of Chicago in my hometown of Elmira, New York, where I grew up. And I thought to myself, I would love to be able to do this show someday. So fast forward through still more years of ballet training, college in terms of being a dance major, strictly ballet for the most part, dancing with my first contemporary ballet company and sort of freelancing through ballet before I started actually getting into musical theater professionally. And then it wasn't for still another 10 years after that, I was cast in a national tour of Chicago the musical so what was that, 2018? And then in 2019, September of 2019, I got a phone call to text message. It was a text. Yeah, I know, right? Technology all these years. I got a text message to see if I wanted to join the Broadway company. And so in October of 2019, I joined the Broadway company of Chicago.
That's amazing. And then the world shut down.
And then the world shut. I mean, I was there for 5 months. And that's what was so interesting too. Everyone was like, don't worry if you get sick. Because, coming into a Broadway theater, a lot of Broadway theaters are old and dusty and things are going on. Don't worry if you get sick. And I was like, no, I am riding this wave. I will not. And I sure did not get sick, but for those 5 months.
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget that phone call. I was already downtown. We're on 49th Street in New York City. And I went to the Starbucks that's on Broadway and whatever, right there. Because the company said, oh, we need to have a meeting. And then we're thinking, okay, no big deal. 2 weeks, right? That was the initial sort of mandate, is 2 weeks shut down. So we're like, yes, 2-week vacation, baby. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, no, this is really going on. So it was a bit of a shock, but still okay. The company reached out to me in different times throughout the pandemic for teaching opportunities, and actually my first major television dance appearance, we had, what did they call, One Night Only, the Best of Broadway. It was freezing cold. It was November and we performed outside, all the safety protocols and everything, but it was so wonderful to see everybody at that point. And just remember, one of my friends who actually lives locally, he was pinning me up against a building. I was standing there in my beads, freezing to death outside. And he was like, don't worry, I'll block you from the wind. So it's been a beautiful experience overall, despite, some of its issues.
It's amazing. I mean, to go from, so many of my patients, I've treated a lot of dancers throughout my career, and a lot of them, envision themselves on the stages of Broadway at some point in their life, and to be able to manifest that to being actually senior dancer on a Broadway show, that must be such an amazing journey.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Would you tell me about how, throughout your journey from childhood dancing to where you are now, injuries, other physical issues that you've had to deal with, and how you dealt with them?
The ballet life is hard. I'm not going to say that it's harder than Broadway just because we do not have an off season. We go year round. You can accrue vacations, seasons, but it's not as though, for example, in a regular job where you're like, oh, I have X amount of days off and I have weekends and I have all these other things, right? That's not in our schedule. And in ballet companies, for example, you might be dancing. Some of them are pushing a little bit more into summer seasons and things to keep people working throughout the year, which is amazing. But typically you'll wrap sometime around like May or June, almost like a school year. And then you've got the summer to sort of get yourself back on track if you have an injury, if you have something going on. So I just remember as a young ballerina, I don't know that I was ever really taught to do this, but I would take more time off in the summer. I was training like crazy during the year. My schedule, I danced pretty much every single day. I didn't dance on Sundays. That was kind of it.
Yeah.
I started teaching when I was 14. So then I was always in the studio from about 3:30 or 4 o'clock every day until 9 o'clock at night. And then on Saturdays from like 9 a.m. to 5 or so. And my first injury was my left ankle when I was 14, my first like major injury.
So common.
Yeah. I came down out of a jump. My ballet teacher was pushing me super hard. Jump further, jump higher, go, push more, and ripped my flexor tendon.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, okay, but you can dance over this. You know you can dance over this, right? Like that was, especially dating myself, especially like in my time, it was sort of like a mind over matter. It did not matter if you were injured. You should just keep pushing. You should just keep going.
Yeah.
And at one point in time, I was literally in a cast and broke the cast because I was still trying to get through because we were doing Paquita. We were doing a ballet. I broke through the cast. And the orthopedic who was going to be doing surgery on my ankle said, you can't do this. You cannot do this. And that was my first sort of understanding of my body cannot push this, should not push this hard. It obviously did. And I got through the recital that year and then had surgery over the summer and had the summer to recover. But that was such an important moment because I realized that all of this stuff, it doesn't come back, right? Those joints, those ligaments, once they rip, once they tear. When I got to college, I kept getting stress fractures in that first metatarsal on that side, not really understanding why it was always happening. I'm like, but my ankle is fixed. Yeah, sure it is. So it was, those were, I feel like the building blocks for learning how to take better care of myself, even though I still wasn't quite mature enough to be able to really go the full length of saying you need rest, you need rehabilitation, you need to be eating better, you need to be taking more care of your body than you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tell my dancers that you are, the way you're training is like a professional athlete.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to treat your body like a professional athlete. So if you're training 6-7 days a week and you're training 8 hours a day, some of these girls, right, taking 7 classes a day, your body's eventually going to break down unless you are doing all the things that you need to be doing, getting enough sleep,
absolutely,
hydrating, getting enough protein, or you talked about diet, getting the rest that you need, rehab. All these things should be a part of your everyday life. But, kids are kids and they don't necessarily want to hear that. What would you say to a kid like that wants to plow through all those injuries and plow through 7 lessons a week? What would you say to that person?
Diversify. I say I took the summers off. In the summers, I would start to do musical theater summer programs. So it wasn't as heavy in dance, which lucky for me, it didn't need to be because I was already training so hard in dance. But it gave me the opportunity to look into singing, to look into acting, to doing other things that were outside of the scope of what I was doing on a daily basis. And I think that's really important to explore those other aspects of the arts particularly for young artists, because now we're seeing you're asking to be, to do everything possible, all different styles of dance, which can also, contribute to injury, and being able to at least like touch on those things, instruments, anything else, being able to touch on those things really helps you to, I also think, find some grounding in what it is that you're doing and learn to appreciate the arts in a completely different manner.
So what would you recommend a young dancer, like how many days a week is it acceptable to train in dancing, and how many days a week do you feel like somebody should be resting?
I think it depends on what your goals are. The reality is, even if when you look at it right from the perspective of being a professional athlete, athletes are training pretty much daily, right? They'll have a couple of days off in the week where it's just a complete rest day, no physical activity, making sure that you're getting that adequate sleep, getting the water you need and hydration, getting whatever snacks you want, that like cheat day or whatever people call it. So if you are looking to really seriously train, I would say at least 5 days a week is absolutely appropriate to be training at that when you want to get to that next higher level. And again, it's about diversifying what it is that you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be taking, for example, like ballet classes 5 times a week. You can certainly take 3 ballet classes a week, take a couple of jazz classes a week, take a tap class during your week, just making sure that you're touching on all those different things.
Gotcha. Just to recap, so young athletes should pay attention to, young dancers in particular should pay attention to volume of training. So yes. Maybe not more than 5 days a week, making sure that they're getting enough protein, making sure that they get enough sleep, making sure that they are addressing their injuries and not ignoring them, and making sure that, they're diversifying their portfolio of abilities. So take a singing lesson, maybe work on photography or anything that isn't dance related in particular. Where do you feel that strength training or like lifting weights plays into dance as well?
It's so important. As a teacher, I try to stress as much as I possibly can for my students to cross-train, particularly those who are hypermobile. That hypermobility is beautiful. Absolutely. I'm super hypermobile, so I'm a big fan, but it can cause different issues down the road. So making sure that you're doing any other kind of cross-training that allows for strength in addition to the flexibility really can make a big difference. And again, that's something that, for example, if you're doing your classes 3 times a week and then you're supplementing in some strength training on other days of the week, then that's probably one of the better ways to go.
Yeah, it'll make you a better dancer as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I use that adage, and I told you this before, that with great power comes great responsibility, but with great mobility comes a great need for stability, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times people think that being too stiff is actually the problem in terms of leading to injury, but it's actually people that are hypermobile that are injured mostly. And like what happened with your ankle and your foot is the reason why you kept on getting those tendinitises is because of that injury that you sustained that increased the amount of flexibility you had, which was like outside of the norm. And then you didn't have the strength and stability around that ankle. So all your tendons and all your own muscles and the tissues are just working so much harder to try to keep everything together. So that's why you got tendinitis constantly.
Yeah. My worst injury happened in my late 20s. I had overstretched my sacroiliac joint in my right hip or in my right back.
Doing a split?
Well, a couple of things. So I was in the international tour of West Side Story, and there is one move where you're constantly doing what's called a battement, brushing this leg over and over again. And the more I kept brushing that leg, the more I kept loosening and going, and I'm stretching and moving into these positions to the point where the joint just was no more. And so during a layoff from the tour, I went to see a doctor, and he said, we are going to have to fuse your hip to your sacrum. You're not dancing again. I did not believe that for myself. I was devastated to hear it, but also I was like, no, that can't be for me. So it forced me sort of out of the business for a while in terms of performing, but it also forced me into strength training and cross training with yoga and Pilates and different things that I'd sort of dabbled with.
Yeah.
But not really gone fully into the practices and gone fully into keeping a more strict schedule for myself around that. And it did eventually make me a stronger dancer by the time all was said and done, because even though I had this high level of flexibility and mobility and strength, right? Of course, dancers are very strong. Our bodies are basically just little muscly things running around. There's not much else to us but muscle and bone. But I realized my agility was better. My ability to focus on what was going on was better too, because then I was also feeding my body, right? Like it was a combination of everything and sort of an unlearning of everything that I had learned before that pushed me into this very other, more healthy, more sustainable way of being, which is also why I feel like at 41 years old, the Broadway schedule is hard, but I'm not like struggling with the Broadway schedule in terms of being like, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, nothing. It really is more along the lines of the normal wear and tear of also having danced for most of my life and the things that just happen to your body naturally.
Yeah, I talk a lot with my patients about capacity, right? So what does that even mean? Capacity is like, how much can your body tolerate, right?
Right.
Literally, what are the things that what are the stresses you can put against your body without it breaking down, right? So say you're an NFL player or a Broadway dancer, you need to be able to take a lot of pounding, a lot of stress. So your capacity is pretty big, right? A lot of, even especially kids, their capacity is not that big. So what happens is that you add all this stress to their body, and then you don't fuel properly, you don't rest properly, you don't lift properly, or your programming in terms of strength training is improper, then that even shrinks your capacity down more, right? So what it seems like you're saying, and what I'm hearing, is that you have learned how to maintain and build your capacity so that you don't get those breakdowns. So for example, like you said, strength training makes you feel more powerful, right?
Yes.
You're able to spring out of those movements, and you're able to land appropriately, absorb shock, because you are stronger. Literally, your muscles are capable of handling it because you strength trained. And I think that's something that's missing in terms of a lot of the training that especially youth dancers go through. Yeah,
for sure. It's very interesting because you see a lot of classes where, in terms of starting off with, so say for example, you're doing like a stretch, then you're going to learn a combination, then you're going to perform the combination. Most dance teachers will, in that stretch moment, will also add in some ab work. Okay. They'll also, now hold your planks. Okay. Now, hold this split, hold this stretch. But what are you really strengthening in those moments, right? Like depending on what type of ab work you're doing, are you building those glamour muscles, or are you actually working on those deeper core muscles that are going to keep you strong and that are going to keep you solid and stable in pirouettes and in various different like held positions? So it's a little bit too kind of shifting some of our mindsets around the fact that there is a whole world of cross training and strengthening that more and more people, I think, are trying to figure out how we incorporate, for example, Pilates exercises into our warm-ups so that all of those things are happening at once. Having yoga blocks in the studio for when we're doing like balancing exercises, having exercise balls, having elastic bands, having different things, tools to utilize in order to be able to really be creating and building more comprehensive dancers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And weights, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The pure act of lifting a weight and picking up and putting it down, we need to break the connotation of like it is a bro-y thing to do, or that's for meatheads. Really, dancers, if more than a lot of other sports, they need to be lifting weights. They put that stress on their tendons. They need to put that stress on their muscles. And if they are stronger, they will be more protected and they will be better dancers, right?
Absolutely. I think there's still a bit of a fear around bulking up.
Yeah.
So then it's don't touch a weight. I can't possibly do that because I can't get bigger.
Yeah.
Instead of, then grab the light weights.
Yeah.
You know, you can do just as many reps with a light weight and still have the muscle tone. That is absolutely necessary for what we do.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things, I think, partnering is so reliant upon both dancers being able to understand how to utilize their body weight. So then if you have someone who's more hypermobile or who's more flexible and maybe weighs less on the scale, but doesn't have the strength to be able to hold themselves or support their own body, you're just lifting a body.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's really tough for someone to go, okay, now I'm going to like haul this person up while I'm just trying to stand on my own feet. It's a lot of work. And that's one of the primary examples, I think, is just learning how to be better in your own body, so then you are also servicing the people that you're going to eventually be working with.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be working with other people. I'm sure there are lots of people who would love to just live a solo life, but that's not the gig. So you have to be ready.
So you fortunately and through your talent and skill and hard work, of course, were able to make it to the next level. But I'm sure that you've danced with a lot of other people that didn't make it to the next level. And what would you say to some of our listeners that don't know if they have what it takes to make it? What are some indications that maybe they can or maybe they can't? Those are hard questions.
Yeah,
though.
no,
those
that's
are hard
okay.
questions.
I used to say to my students all the time that if you can see yourself doing something else, you may not want to do this.
Wow.
If you can really like envision a whole separate life for yourself, like, oh, I believe I should be in the medical field and this is really for me. I say that because when I was younger, I was like, I'm going to be a pediatrician when I was 4, right? So I started dancing when I was 8. And then I stepped up to a ballet bar and I said, oh, there's nothing else for me.
Wow.
There's absolutely nothing else for me. This is what I must do. So that's sort of my rule of thumb. And if you have to drag yourself to class, if you have to drag yourself or someone else has to drag you to get to class, any kind of training, you most likely don't want to do this, because I think the impression is that this is all very glamorous and this is all very glitzy and fun and everything else. But when you are in like 4 hours of rehearsal and then you still have to do a show that night, you're not feeling super great about what the schedule becomes, because then you go, oh, and also that's just the start of my week. That's not the end of my week. That's the start of my week. And I'm going through. Yeah. And schedules change, right? So our schedule at Chicago, for example, we have Wednesdays off, but then we get back to the theater on Thursday. It's Thursday, Friday, 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, and then you're still going on Monday and Tuesday. You're not home you're home in the morning on Christmas, but not in the evening. You do not get Thanksgiving evening. Like, you're working on holidays, you're working on birthdays. There are a lot of, I don't always love to use the word sacrifices, but that kind of is the word. You do have to understand that with our schedule comes the understanding that you're going to be forfeiting more of your personal time for work time. And that just is what it is.
I see. Yeah, you're really counterselling it.
I know, right? There are beautiful, of course, there are beautiful things about it. It's interesting because there are some people, and I would say a lot of performers, who they live for the applause. They're like, yes, this, I hear this. And so I've done a good job. And I've sort of always been in the mindset, what am I giving? Mm-hmm. It's very much an exchange for me in the sense that I hope that I'm giving as much as I'm getting. Mm. And especially on those days when you're not getting any, when the audience is like silent, you're like, ta-da, and nothing happens.
Crickets.
You just go, But I try to find at least one person in the audience if I can. There are some days you can't find anybody and you just go, wow, we just danced for each other. But I always try to find at least one person that I go, okay, that's who the show is for. Yeah. Or like remind myself, there was a friend at the show who always used to say, do it for Granny in the 5th row. And you never, that's just like this thing. But it was such a good mindset to think about as well, because if you are going into it with this idea that it's going to be, look at all this fame and acclaim and celebrity and all this other stuff, I hope you have another reason. Yeah, I would say that. I hope you have another reason for trying to have this life, because like I said, if you can envision yourself doing something else, that might be for you.
Yeah, I think about that Venn diagram. It's like, in order to be great at anything, you need to have a combination of opportunity, you need to have talent, and you need to have obsession. Yeah. Right? So if you don't have all three of those things about this one thing, you're probably not going to be great. Yeah. Right? And to make it to Broadway, you have to be great, right? You have to or be great. To the, NFL field, or to the major leagues or anything. In order to be fantastic or great at anything, you have to have all those three things. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So in terms of advice, so if you could talk to yourself 20 years ago and give that young Arian a little tidbit, what would it be?
I would have definitely started eating better sooner.
Oh, okay.
Like a more broad. Now I say that not loosely. I have a lot of food sensitivities. Mm-hmm. So it's taken me quite a while to figure out what's the right balance of things for my body specifically. And, and also being mindful of the fact that for the most part, because of the nature of our schedule, we have a pretty high rate of inflammation. Yeah. So then learning what things to eat to help with inflammation, not just constantly popping a pill or doing something like that. But it definitely would be around my things outside of dance, making sure I'm getting rest, making sure I'm feeding and nourishing my body, making sure I'm feeding and nourishing my mind and my soul, because sometimes that gets a little pushed on, the back burner as well with this profession. And finding whatever other cross-training things would have benefited me, and just figuring out, right, what the schedule could possibly be around that, in addition to the schedule I was trying to keep in order to get to this greatness, you know what I mean? Or this next high level.
Yeah. Do you have a recommended, diet has a negative connotation, but what does your kind of everyday meal in and out of training, in and out of dance, when you're in your working season?
Yeah, I try to keep as much of a high protein diet as I possibly can. That is what works primarily for me. I've learned over the years to try to incorporate carbs a little bit more, but I notice I keep a pack of Archer Farms mini meat sticks at my station at work. Nice. And pretty much every day during intermission, I'm grabbing so that one of those meat sticks. Before the show, we always giggle. I eat gluten-free pretzels, but I grab a handful of gluten-free pretzels, and I call them my pre-show pretzels, just to have that extra little hit of carbohydrate before I go on stage. And the way that our schedule is set up is a little funky, so I end up eating my dinner sometimes usually around 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and I do snack after the show. Like, and whatever that snack may be, usually it would be something, every now and then it would be like nachos, right? Like I want the cheese, I want the carbohydrates, I want the salt because I've been depleted after, dancing. So I'm like, yes, I will make myself, and it's goat cheese, but it's still no matter what. Or again, some kind of like chicken meatballs or something that I know for my body works and helps me maintain my muscle tone and helps me maintain energy.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, nachos, like top 5 best foods of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, especially with those kids that are training a lot, and a lot of them, they're high school students or the middle school students, and they have a lot of homework and they're in and out of the studio. They don't feel like they have a lot of time to eat. And one of my biggest things with them is that you need to ask your parents, buy a bunch of snacks, specifically like meat sticks or beef jerky or even protein shakes, like just throwing back some calories, and specifically good calories, is going to make a big difference, especially for healing, right? A lot of these kids are injured and their bodies literally need the substrates, the building materials to help, heal the injury. And if they're not consuming it, they're not going to heal.
Right. Yeah. I used to be very afraid of food, right? Like there was this very specific focus on just staying skinny, staying small in order to be able to fit the whatever the ideal is, particularly when I was in the ballet world. And I can't say that I probably consume enough calories for my height and weight. I still relatively am pretty small, just sort of overall, but I eat more. Like, and I find myself going, okay, wait a minute, you haven't eaten today. Like, get something, go find a mandarin, go eat some blueberries, I have like sort of a list of things that I particularly like to eat. And so I go get those things, make yourself a little plate of whatever it is that you're going to consume and make sure that you get that in your body. Or,
make it a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be days when I'm literally like, I will cook a sausage, wrap it in a paper towel and like go to run my errands when I'm like, eat that sausage as you go around and about in your day to make sure you get something.
Just sausage juice like rolling down your elbow.
That's exactly right. Putting in my, my little hydration packets into my cup so that I've got that, with me, the additional stuff, but just figuring out how to make it work.
Yeah. Just prioritizing food and prioritizing recovery as, the primary goal and not just performance, right?
Absolutely.
And do you feel like that mentality, this is probably a tough subject, but the presence of issues regarding body dysmorphia and anorexia growing up through kind of the dance world, I know that we've treated a lot of patients that have suffered with that come from the dance world and the figure skating world specifically. How do you address that, especially with even your own students where, you're not a psychiatrist or a counselor, so it's not really your or my purview, but when you are instructing and helping these kids, what kind of language do you use to really help them look at food in a different way, especially in the dance world where, image is everything?
I try to express to them as much as possible that they have to be healthy within their own body, and that looks very different on each individual body. It was very important to me to start to do a lot of research around the relationship between poor eating habits and injury and health and wellness. So I did a lot of that research, particularly as I was going more into teaching in my early 30s. And would sit with my students. For example, if we were doing a summer program, I would try to talk to them about something different during every lunchtime. And food and their relationship with food became one of the more important topics that we would talk about. And I would say to them, it's important to make sure that you're eating things that again, make you feel good. And that's not necessarily like grabbing a package of cookies and going, this makes me feel great.
Yeah.
Right? Makes you feel good in terms of your energy levels, makes you feel good in terms of what it is then you're able to do in the studio, makes you feel good so that if you're in school, your mind is sharp, you're able to focus, you're not feeling tired or despondent. And slowly but surely they were going, oh, wait a minute. I get it, right? Like if I'm eating and I'm eating things that are healthy for my body, I'm going to perform better in my life in general. This is not just in the dance studio.
It's not just about image.
Exactly. It's really more about the fact that like this is the way that my body looks. And I know that I can then also perform in the studio, but also I'm getting better grades. Like I'm able to focus in school more. I'm able to have more energy throughout the day because I'm doing all these other things that are benefiting me overall.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. I mean, as somebody that works with, a lot of younger athletes, and yourself, you're working with a lot of younger athletes, a lot of it is just education, right? They're learning. They are not experienced. So for you to come on the podcast and really give these kids, like they probably all aspire to be you at one point, but having that information coming from you rather than coming from me, right? Short little Asian guy that's their physical therapist. They don't care what I think, but you and your life experience and everything that you've been through, all the injuries that you've experienced, all the setbacks and rejection and everything else like that. These are the things that these principles of eating right, eating the right foods, getting enough rest, cross-training, lifting weights, diversifying your portfolio in terms of movement and social, mental, spiritual health.
Yeah.
Those are things that have brought you to the point that you are now.
Yeah.
And we couldn't be happier that you were here with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And another life change coming.
Yes.
Yes, you're expecting, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
I am 24 weeks pregnant on Sunday.
I wouldn't believe you.
No, I know. Even my neighbor said, wait a minute, I look more pregnant than you do. So we're very excited.
That's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And we hope to see more in the future.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.